Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in Braunau in a small Austrian town near the border with Germany. His father, Alois Hitler, was a stern and authoritarian customs officer, while his mother, Clara Hitler, was a gentle and caring woman who adored her son. The contrast between his parents would come to define much of young Adolf's emotional world, caught between a need for affection and a constant pressure to conform to expectations. From a young age, Hitler was known to have a temper and a fascination with structure, power, and identity. He performed well in primary school but quickly lost interest and became rebellious in secondary education. His passion lay in the arts, particularly painting and architecture, but his authoritarian father wanted him to pursue a career in civil service. After repeated conflicts, Hitler's father passed away in 1903. His mother continued to support his artistic ambitions until her death from breast cancer in 1900, a loss that devastated him emotionally. Hitler moved to Vienna to pursue his dream of becoming an artist, applying twice to the Academy of Fine Arts. He failed both times, being told his work lacked talent for painting, though he showed some architectural ability. These rejections wounded his pride and hardened his growing sense of isolation and resentment. It was during this time in Vienna that Hitler's worldview began to take a dark turn. Living in poverty and exposed to rising anti-Semitic and nationalist ideologies, Hitler absorbed the ideas that would later become the core of Nazi philosophy. He read widely, consuming books on racial theory, German nationalism, and history. He came to view Jews not just as a religious group but as a dangerous race responsible for the decline of Austria and Germany. He also developed a deep hatred for Marxism, which he associated with Jewish intellectuals and revolutionaries, though he never held a formal job during this period. Hitler lived off the inheritance from his parents and money earned by selling postcards and small paintings. In 1913, Hitler left Vienna for Munich, Germany, hoping to avoid military service in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. When World War I broke out the following year, he volunteered for the German army. He served as a messenger on the Western Front, showing bravery under fire and earning the Iron Cross. But while many of his comrades perished, Hitler survived 4 years of brutal trench warfare, suffering only minor injuries. He felt at home in the army, finding purpose, brotherhood, and structure. When Germany surrendered in November 1918, Hitler, recovering from a gas attack in a hospital, was stunned. Like many nationalists, he believed that Germany had been betrayed from within. He blamed Jews, socialists, and the democratic politicians of the Weimar Republic for what he called the stab in the back. After the war, Hitler returned to Munich, directionless but burning with anger. He joined a small nationalist group called the German Workers' Party. Attracted by its anti-Semitic and anti-Marxist platform, he quickly rose to prominence through his oratorical skill and fiery passion. He soon became the group's chief propagandist and strategist, eventually renaming it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. Hitler's speeches drew crowds, energizing masses of Germans disillusioned by economic instability, humiliation from the Treaty of Versailles, and fears of communism. He painted a picture of a strong, united Germany free from the chains of globalism, Marxism, and Jewish influence. His message found fertile ground. In 1923, Hitler and the Nazi Party attempted to overthrow the Bavarian government in what became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. The coup failed. Hitler was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in Landsberg prison, though he served less than a year. During his imprisonment, he dictated his manifesto, Mink, to Rudolf Hess. The book outlined his racial theories, hatred of Jews, contempt for democracy, and vision for German expansion eastward. While it sold modestly at first, it later became required reading in Nazi Germany. Following his release, Hitler restructured the Nazi Party. He created a paramilitary wing, the Sturmabteilung or SA, to intimidate rivals and control the streets. In time, he also formed the Morally Schutzstaffel, or SS, which would become central to the regime's future crimes. His propaganda machine, led by Joseph Goebbels, mastered the art of manipulating mass media and public opinion. The global Great Depression in 1929 played directly into Hitler's hands. As unemployment soared and the German economy collapsed, people turned to extremes. The Nazis blamed the crisis on international Jewry, the Treaty of Versailles, and the weakness of the Weimar government. By exploiting fear and promising revival, Hitler's support grew rapidly. In 1932, Hitler ran for president against Paul von Hindenburg and lost, but the Nazi Party became the largest in the Reich. Under pressure from conservative elites, Hindenburg appointed Hitler as Chancellor of Germany on January 30, 1933. Once in power, Hitler moved quickly to consolidate his control. Following the suspicious Reichstag fire, he pushed through emergency laws that suspended civil liberties. The Enabling Act passed in March 1933, giving Hitler dictatorial powers. Political opposition was crushed. Trade unions were banned. Journalists and intellectuals were silenced. the Nazis began to establish a totalitarian regime rooted in loyalty to Hitler, control of all aspects of life, and brutal enforcement through the Gestapo and SSS in 1934. After the death of President Hindenburg, Hitler merged the offices of Chancellor and President, declaring himself the leader of Germany. A cult of personality emerged, portraying Hitler as Germany's savior. The regime rapidly implemented racial laws and anti-Semitic policies. Jews were stripped of their rights, barred from public service, and eventually segregated from society. Hitler pursued an aggressive foreign policy aimed at overturning the Versailles Treaty and expanding German territory. He reoccupied the Rhineland in 1936 and annexed Austria in 1938, cheered on by nationalist fervor. Later that year, he demanded the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia. Britain and France, following a policy of appeasement, allowed the annexation through the Munich Agreement. Hitler promised peace but invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia in March 1939. His ambitions were no longer deniable. On September 1, 1939, Hitler ordered the invasion of Poland, using a staged attack on a German radio station as a pretext. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war. World War II had begun. Hitler's military campaign saw rapid success. Poland fell in weeks. In 1940, the Nazis conquered Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. Hitler's blitzkrieg tactics combined speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. Only Britain, under Winston Churchill, resisted. Hitler's attempt to bomb Britain into submission failed during the Battle of Britain. In June 1941, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. It was the largest military operation in history. Millions of troops swept across Eastern Europe, but the campaign bogged down in the Russian winter, and the Soviet resistance was fierce. At Stalingrad in 1942-43, the German army suffered its first major defeat. At the same time, Hitler's racial ideology turned to genocidal. The Holocaust began in earnest with mass shootings by the Einsatzgruppen and the establishment of extermination camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and The Nazis murdered 6 million Jews, as well as millions of others Romani people, disabled individuals, Slavs, political prisoners, and more. Hitler's regime industrialized death. By 1943, the war turned against Germany. Allied forces landed in Italy, and in 1944, they launched D-Day, the invasion of Normandy. German forces were pushed back on all fronts. As Soviet troops advanced from the east and west and allies closed in from the west, Hitler became increasingly delusional and isolated. In April 1945, Soviet forces surrounded Berlin. In his underground Führerbunker, Hitler married Eva Braun and dictated his final political testament. On April 30th, he took his own life with a pistol shot to the head. His body was burned by loyal aides. Days later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The legacy of Adolf Hitler is one of destruction, hatred, and unparalleled human suffering. He led the world into its most devastating conflict, resulting in the deaths of over 70 million people. His rise to power was not the result of fate or inevitability, but of choices by elites who empowered him, by citizens who followed him, and by others who remained silent. The story of Hitler is a dark mirror to humanity's potential for cruelty, and a warning of what happens when ideology, fear, and dehumanization go unchecked. To remember his life is not to glorify it, but to ensure that such evil is never allowed to rise again.